Hello everyone, this is Test Your Digestive Knowledge, the gastrointestinal system in the shark, the mudpuppy, and the cat. So basically this is a quiz-dio, and in the next several slides you're going to see a note card. On this note card is the function of a particular organ, right in the center. On the bottom left is the animals that you've been looking at if you're taking comparative anatomy. It's the animals that this particular organ is found in, and that the function of the particular organ is found in. So, can you guess what organ makes bile, filters poison, and provides energy storage? The answer is the liver, which is the second largest organ in the body, the first being your skin. But the liver is the site of detoxification. The liver is very important. It's also the site of energy storage. So you guys are probably familiar with jaundice. Jaundice occurs in the liver when those energy stores are being depleted. And then ketoacidosis occurs when the energy stores in the liver have been depleted, and then the energy stores and peripheral reserves are now being depleted as well. So you want to make sure that you always have energy uptake. Now in the shark, the liver is actually very oily, and that's because the shark does not have a swim bladder, and so the oily liver is providing buoyancy for the shark. Can you guess what produces, stores, and breaks down red blood cells in the shark, the mudpuppy, and the cat? The answer is the spleen. For sharks, the spleen is the main part of the immune system. In the mudpuppy and the cat, or just even mammals in general, our immune systems are very complex, so there are many things that are involved in our immune systems. Can you guess what is the first section of the small intestine in the shark, the mudpuppy, and the cat? The answer is the duodenum. The duodenum is receiving the bolus from the stomach as it enters the small intestine. Can you guess what accessory organ of the shark collects salts? The answer is the rectal gland, not to be confused with the rectum. The rectum is the last part of the colon. The rectal gland is an organ in sharks that is collecting salts from the blood, so it's removing salts from the blood. Can you guess what absorbs nutrients and minerals from food in the shark, the mudpuppy, and the cat? The answer is the small intestine. So if you remember, the small intestine in the shark is called the spiral valve intestine. And while it may seem shorter, the spiral valve on the inside of the intestine functions in the same way our small intestine does. So the small intestine is very long, and that's to increase the amount of time for absorption. There are also little villi and microvilli on the walls of the intestine to increase the surface area for absorption. Can you guess what organ releases both digestive, excretory, and genital products in the shark and the mudpuppy? The answer is the cloaca. So mammals do not have a cloaca. Our excretory waste gets released through the urethra, and our digestive waste gets released through an anus. But in the shark and the mudpuppy, both types of waste are released through the cloaca. Can you guess what stores bile in the shark, the mudpuppy, and the cat? The answer is the gallbladder. Remember, the gallbladder stores bile. It does not produce bile. Bile is produced in the liver. The gallbladder, though, because it is holding that bile or storing the bile, it is always on or near the liver. And it looks like basically it looks like the liver has a blister. So you'll always know the gallbladder when you see it if you just look for a blister on the surface of the liver. And sometimes the gallbladder is green because the color of bile is green. Can you guess what is involved in mastication in the mudpuppy and the cat? The answer is the mouth. This is kind of a trick question because we know that sharks also have mouths, but sharks generally don't chew, so mastication is the act of chewing, so if they do not chew, then they don't use their mouths to masticate. Only mudpuppies and cats, and of course ourselves, we use the mouth for chewing. Do you know what organ absorbs water and forms feces in the shark, the mudpuppy, and the cat? The answer is the large intestine, or the colon. Do you know what is the term for the third part of the small intestine in the mudpuppy and the cat? The answer is the ileum. So you are going to, in general, want to know the order of the three parts of the small intestine. So far, you know that the duodenum is the first portion of the small intestine, and the ileum is the last. So what's the second? Can you guess what regulates blood sugar in the shark, the mudpuppy, and the cat? The answer is the pancreas. The pancreas has both an exocrine and endocrine function, and the endocrine function is regulating blood sugar using insulin and glucagon. Can you guess what substance acts as an emulsifier in the shark, the mudpuppy, and the cat? The answer is bile. In the act of emulsification, bile is basically breaking down large fat droplets. And what this effectively does is that it increases the surface area for enzymatic activity. Can you guess what breaks down carbohydrates in the mouth of the mudpuppy and the cat? The answer is salivary amylase. Sharks do not have salivary amylase, so carbohydrate digestion does not begin in the mouth of the shark. Can you guess what is involved in gulping in the shark? I'm sure you got this one right because we did just talk about it. Sharks do not generally chew, but they do gulp. So the mouth is involved in gulping. Can you guess what parts of the mudpuppy and cat houses probiotics, or helpful bacteria? The answer is the cecum. The cecum is at the very beginning of the large intestine, where the small intestine is ending. And off the cecum is the appendix. So the appendix is associated with the cecum. Can you guess what the second part of the small intestine is in the mudpuppy and the cat? The answer is the jejunum. So now you know the first part is the duodenum, the second is the jejunum, and the last is the ileum. The cecum is regarded as part of the large intestine. What organ is hydrochloric acid, pepsinogen, and gastric lipase secreted in the shark, the mudpuppy, and the cat? The answer is the stomach. The stomach is secreting gastric juices to start the process of breakdown, or chemical breakdown. Can you guess what muscle controls entry of food from the stomach into the duodenum of the small intestine in the shark, the mudpuppy, and the cat? The answer is the pylorus, or the pyloric sphincter. The pyloric sphincter is at the very bottom of the stomach, and it expands and contracts to allow food through. Another sphincter that's located at the very beginning of the stomach is called the esophageal sphincter, that's receiving food from the esophagus. And that of course brings me to controls entry of food from the esophagus into the stomach. And because I already gave the answer to this one away, it is a bit of a freebie, but the answer is the esophageal sphincter, also sometimes known as the cardiac sphincter. What secretes trypsinogen, lipase, and amylase into the duodenum of the small intestine in the shark, the mudpuppy, and the cat? The answer is the pancreas. So we already know that the pancreas has an endocrine function in regulating blood sugar, but it also has an exocrine function in secreting pancreatic juices into the pancreatic duct. Through what duct is bile released into the small intestine in the shark, the mudpuppy, and the cat? The answer is the common bile duct. Through what duct are pancreatic juices released into the small intestine in the shark, the mudpuppy, and the cat? The answer is the pancreatic duct. Now, just a quick side note, because the pancreas is dumping digestive enzymes through the pancreatic duct into the duodenum, you will always find the pancreas on or near the duodenum of the small intestine. And in most cases, the pancreas looks like a chewed up piece of gum that someone just spit into the body cavity. What is the lower portion of the large intestine referred to in the shark, mudpuppy, and the cat? The answer is the rectum, not to be confused with the rectal gland. What organ receives food from the mouth in the shark, the mudpuppy, and the cat? The answer is the pharynx. The pharynx is what the food is going to go through before it passes into the esophagus. What organ keeps food from entering the trachea in the mudpuppy and the cat? The answer is the epiglottis. So, when you say that water went to the wrong pipe and you start coughing, it's because your epiglottis did not do its job of keeping anything that should not be going into the trachea out of the trachea. Where does carbohydrate digestion begin in the mudpuppy and the cat? The answer is the mouth. So, in the mudpuppy and the cat, there's salivary amylase. Sharks do not have salivary amylase, and so carbohydrate digestion, does not begin in the mouth of the shark. Where does protein digestion begin in the mudpuppy and the cat? The answer is the stomach. So in the stomach is a juice of proteases that are made to break down proteins.